All right, so are you ready to like really dive deep into some intense ideas today?
Always up for a challenge.
Well, good, because we are going like all the way in with this conversation between, that philosopher Slavoj Žižek,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and Aaron Bastani on Novara Media.
I've seen that one.
You have?
Yeah.
Who'd you think?
I mean, it's Yushik, so...
Yeah, true. Never a dull moment.
Right.
I mean, even the title, Our World is Coming to an End, kind of grabs you, right?
Yeah. You kind of know going in it's going to be a wild ride.
Totally. But honestly, I gotta say, it's not all like doom and gloom.
It's really not. It's surprisingly wide-ranging. They go all over the place.
Exactly. Like revolutions, the future of capitalism, political correctness, even anti-Semitism. It's all in there.
Yeah. It's definitely not predictable. And to really get Zizek,
Mm.
I think you got to start with the man himself. I mean, he calls himself a Stalinist.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I know, right? But it's not like about actual politics, really. It's more about discipline, like being super rigorous. He doesn't drink, doesn't do drugs, all that.
Huh. Why?
Well, he says the world is too dangerous to let your guard down, even for a second.
Wow. Intense.
Yeah.
Much. So he's like always on edge, analyzing everything.
Pretty much. And speaking of analyzing, he takes on this classic slogan, from like the '68 protests, demand the impossible.
Yeah, I always kind of like that one. Sounds inspiring.
You'd think, huh? But Zizek actually says it's limiting. He says people think crazy stuff like AI taking over the world is possible.
Oh yeah, that's a popular one these days.
Right. But then we turn around and think doing practical things like, raising taxes for healthcare is impossible. Like, we've got it backwards.
Oh, that's so true. It's like we've lowered the bar for what we consider possible. And what about all those changes we're missing out on because we just assume they're too big?
Exactly. It makes you wonder. And this whole idea of what's possible, it kind of connects to another thing he talks about, political correctness.
Oh yeah, he goes there for sure. Doesn't hold back at all.
Nope. He's basically saying that, like, while cancel culture and all that stuff, the intentions are often good,
Right.
it can actually backfire for the left.
Backfire how?
Well, he thinks it makes it harder to build the coalitions you need for, like, real change.
Like you need to find common ground even with people you don't agree with on everything.
Exactly. He uses Bernie Sanders and abortion as an example, remember?
Oh, right, yeah. What was that again?
Okay, so instead of just being like, abortion should be legal, end of story.
Which is where a lot of people are, yeah.
Right. Sanders says we should also focus on why women get abortions in the first place.
Like poverty, lack of access to health care, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's a deeper, more nuanced approach.
It's more about addressing the root causes rather than just arguing about symptoms. Like, let's look at the bigger picture and find common ground, even if it's tough.
It's about having those hard conversations instead of just shutting people down.
So true. Okay, so on a totally different note, let's talk about how Žižek sees capitalism changing. He's really into this idea of techno-feudalism, which sounds kind of sci-fi and not in a good way.
It does have a dystopian ring to it.
So break it down for me. What is techno-feudalism exactly?
Okay, so imagine Amazon, Google, all these huge tech companies.
Oh, I know them.
Right. Well, they basically become the new, like, feudal lords.
I'm listening.
And we all become their, like, digital serfs.
Okay, hold on. That's kind of freaky. Like how?
Think about it. They control so much of our online lives, right?
Yeah, shopping, working, connecting with people.
And we're basically paying them rent just to participate. Like, every click, every purchase, it all feeds the system.
Wow, that's a little creepy when you put it like that. It's like we traded convenience for control without even realizing it.
It's definitely something to think about. And as if techno-feudalism wasn't bad enough, he brings up this other weird idea. Zionist anti-Semites.
Wait, what? Zionist anti-Semites? How does that even work?
Yeah, it's kind of a head-scratcher. He's talking about people who support Israel, even, like, want it to expand.
Okay.
But at the same time, they have these super anti-Semitic views.
Seriously, so they're okay with a Jewish state, just not with Jewish people?
Well, more like they're okay with the Jewish state as long as it's over there and not here.
That is so bizarre. It's like supporting the idea of something, but hating the actual people involved. Like total cognitive dissonance.
Right.
Any examples?
Yeah, like that guy, Anders Breivik, the Norwegian mass murderer.
Oh, right. The one who...
yeah. He was all about Israel existing, even getting bigger, but then he demonized Jews who lived in Europe.
Wow, that's messed up.
Yeah.
So this idea of Zionist anti-Semites is like a real thing, not just some random Žižek thing.
Unfortunately, yeah. It actually has some history to it. Žižek mentions Heinrich Himmler.
Himmler, like the top Nazi guy.
The very same. And, get this, even H.E. wanted a Jewish state in Palestine.
Wait, seriously, why?
Because he wanted to get rid of all the Jews in Europe.
Wow. So basically, supporting Israel doesn't automatically mean you're not anti-Semitic.
Exactly. It's a lot more complicated than that.
And it's all tied to this idea of where Jews belong, right? Which gets to something even bigger. Joja talks about the decline of cosmopolitanism.
Right. So think about it. For centuries, European Jews were kind of scattered all over the place. No one specific homeland. They didn't belong to one place.
So they developed a much broader, more universal view of humanity.
Exactly. They were almost forced into cosmopolitanism.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what happens when that cosmopolitanism declines? What do we lose?
We lose that ability to see ourselves as part of a global community, to embrace diversity and see the world from different perspectives.
It's like we're losing that sense of shared humanity. And that makes it so much easier to fall into us versus them thinking.
Exactly. And that's a perfect segue into another one of Žižek's concerns, these weird, almost unholy alliances that are popping up.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It's like the far right teaming up with certain anti-Western groups. Like, what brings them together?
Well, often it's a shared opposition to things like feminism, LGBTQ rights, that kind of stuff. They find common ground in resisting change.
So it's less about shared values and more about shared enemies.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. They might hate each other's guts, but they hate the other even more.
It just shows how complicated and messed up everything is these days. Makes it tough to know who to trust.
Absolutely. You can't just take things at face value. You got to look deeper, see what's really motivating people.
Be skeptical. Question everything.
Exactly. But before we get too bogged down in all the negativity.
Yeah, good point. It can get pretty heavy.
There are some glimmers of hope in this conversation, too. Like, Žižek talks about how even in really divided places, there are people pushing back against hatred and prejudice.
Yeah.
He gives the example of Palestinian intellectuals condemning Mahmoud Abbas when he made those anti-Semitic remarks.
Oh, wow, yeah, I remember that. That took a lot of courage. It's encouraging to see people willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's risky.
And then there's the Iranian uprising after Mahsa Amini's death.
Oh man, that was so powerful.
It went way beyond typical Western feminist stuff. You had everyone, men, women, religious folks, secular folks, all coming together against the regime.
Yeah, it really showed the potential for solidarity, even in a place where you wouldn't expect it. Like maybe things are starting to shift.
It gives you hope, right? And speaking of complicated issues, Žižek doesn't shy away from immigration either. But his take is kind of nuanced.
So he's not just pro or anti-immigration.
No, it's not that simple. He's all for helping refugees, but he's not totally on board with this open borders thing either.
So more like a middle ground. What does he suggest?
Well, he wants a more organized system, one that considers the challenges of integration and cultural differences.
So not just letting everyone in willy-nilly, but also not shutting the door completely.
Right. It's about finding a balance between compassion and practicality.
It's about acknowledging the complexity and finding solutions that work for everyone.
Which isn't easy. But hey, Žižek isn't known for taking the easy way out. True that. And that's what makes him so fascinating, right? He challenges us to think deeper, to question everything, to never settle for simple answers.
He's like a mental workout.
Exactly. And sometimes that's what we need, to be pushed out of our comfort zones and forced to really grapple with the tough questions.
He doesn't make it easy on us.
Nope, he definitely doesn't. But he makes it interesting. And that's why we keep coming back for more, right?
I think so. It's like even when you disagree with him, he makes you think.
And that's a valuable thing in itself. All right, on that note, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll unpack Žižek's famous line, pessimism in theory, optimism in practice.
Oh, that's a good one.
It is. And see how it ties into all this stuff about the end of the world, political correctness, and all those unholy alliances. Stay with us.
It's kind of like he sees right through all the BS and calls it out.
Yeah, no sugarcoating with Žižek. But that's also why I think people find him so refreshing.
Totally. So, okay, let's talk about that line he's famous for. Pessimism in theory, optimism in practice.
Yeah, that one's always stuck with me. But I got to admit, I'm not sure I totally get it. Like, how do you live that way?
Right. It sounds kind of contradictory, right? Like, how can you be pessimistic and optimistic at the same time?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think what he means is, like, on the one hand, we got to be real about the problems in the world, climate change, inequality, all that stuff. We can't just pretend it's not that bad or it'll magically fix itself.
So no rose-colored glasses, huh? We got to look at the world as it is, even if it's kind of scary.
Exactly. But here's the thing. He's not saying we should just give up because things look bleak. That's where the optimism comes in.
So it's not about being naive. It's about being realistic, AD hopeful.
Yeah, like a grounded hope. We know things are messed up, but we still believe we can make things better.
And that connects back to what he was saying about demand the impossible.
Right.
Totally.
It's not that we shouldn't have big goals or fight for what we believe in. It's more about not letting those big abstract ideas distract us from the concrete things we can do right now.
Like sometimes we get so caught up in the what if that we forget about the what is.
Exactly. And I think those examples of resistance he talks about, like those Palestinian intellectuals and the Iranian uprising, they show that even when things are really tough, people can still fight for what they believe in and make a difference.
It's like they're not waiting for permission or for some perfect moment. They're just doing what they can right now, even if it's risky.
And that's what's so inspiring about it. It shows that even small acts of resistance can have a big impact. They can inspire others to join in, to raise their voices, and to demand something better.
So it's not just about individual actions. It's about how those actions connect to a larger movement for change.
Right, like a ripple effect. And I think that's what Žižek is getting at with this whole pessimism in theory, optimism in practice thing.
It's about finding that balance between being aware of the problems and still believing that we can overcome them.
Exactly. And that we're not alone in this. There are people all over the world who are fighting for a more just and equitable world. And we can all be part of that fight in our own way.
So it's about finding those points of connection, those places where our own values and passions intersect with the struggles of others, and then figuring out how we can contribute.
And that's what makes Žižek so relevant, I think. He's not just talking about abstract philosophical ideas, he's giving us a framework for thinking about how to engage with the world and make a difference.
Yeah, he's like, okay, here's the bad news, but here's what you can do about it.
Exactly. He's not just diagnosing the problem, he's offering solutions.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to bring it back to you, the listener. What does all this mean for you? How can you take these insights and apply them to your own life?
That's the real question, right? And I think it starts with being honest with ourselves about the state of the world. Like, no more pretending everything is fine.
Yeah, we got to be real about the challenges we face.
But then we got to find that spark of optimism, that belief that we can actually make things better, and then we got to act on it.
So it's not enough to just think about these things. We got to de-dose something about it.
Exactly. Even if it's something small, every action counts. Every conversation, every donation, every time we stand up for what we believe in, it all adds up.
It's like that old saying, be the change you want to see in the world.
Exactly. So go out there, find your way to contribute, and make a difference. The world needs you.
It's like he's saying, hey, wake up. The world's a mess, but you're not powerless.
Yeah, he's definitely not about passive acceptance.
So it's like, be aware of the problems, but don't get overwhelmed by them.
Right. Like acknowledge the darkness, but don't lose sight of the light.
And that's where this whole pessimism in theory, optimism in practice thing comes in.
I think so. It's about being like warriors and gardeners at the same time.
Warriors and gardeners. I like that.
Yeah, so warriors in the sense that we're fighting against injustice and oppression.
Okay, I get that.
But also gardeners, right? Because we're trying to cultivate something new, something better.
So we need both, the fighting spirit and the patience, to nurture something good.
Exactly. We got to be tough, but also hopeful.
And I think that's what we see in those examples of resistance, right? The Palestinian intellectuals, the Iranian protesters, they're not just fighting against something, they're also fighting for something.
Right. They have a vision for a better future, and they're willing to risk everything to make it happen.
And that's where the optimism comes in. Even though they're facing incredible challenges, they still believe that change is possible.
And that's what's so inspiring about it. It shows that even in the darkest of times, we can still find hope and make a difference.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can they do?
I think it starts with finding your own way to contribute. Like, what are you passionate about? What skills and talents do you have?
And how can you use those things to make a positive impact on the world?
Exactly. It doesn't have to be something huge, you know? It could be volunteering, donating to a cause you believe in, having those tough conversations with people who have different viewpoints.
It's about finding those small acts of resistance that resonate with you and just doing what you can.
Right. Because every little bit helps. And when we all do our part, it creates a ripple effect that can lead to real change.
So don't underestimate the power of your own actions.
Even small things can make a big difference.
So to wrap things up, I guess the message is this. The world is complex. There are a lot of problems out there. B-U-T.
We're not powerless.
Exactly. We can make difference.
Yeah.
So be informed, be engaged, and find your own way to contribute to a better future.
And keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing for something better.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's it for this deep dive into the world of Slavoj Žižek. Thanks for joining us.